I grew up without electricity or roads or phones or anything. And so a lot of life was just about like making things work imperfectly.
Hello, welcome to the Remotely Creative Podcast. I'm your host, Scotty Carlson. On today's show, we're joined by Gwen Johnson. I know Gwen really well, and I'm super stoked she's here. Gwen grew up on Reed Island, which is a remote Gulf island on BC's west coast. It was a boat access, grow your own food, make your own fun adventure land. We dive into how Gwen's super remote upbringing actually built the foundation for her creativity and gave her the ability to find power in imperfection, which is super cool. We also go deep into why Gwen thinks fun and play in your creative practice is really important for your health. And that's really cool too. Now, let's roll. Hi.
Okay. I'll let you go.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. You're Gwen Johnson.
Yes.
You're born in the Gulf Islands of BC.
Yes.
In Comox.
Yes.
Spent the first year of your life on Cortez.
Yes.
Then on Reed Island.
Yep.
Then you moved to Quadra Island.
Yes.
And then at the age of 18, you moved to the mountains to Roslyn, BC.
Yes.
Where you've been trapped since.
Yes. Stuck in the mountains.
And since your time in Roslyn, you've done lots of stuff. Mm-hmm. But today, what I want to talk about is the things you've done that have been on the creative side. And we can go through there. There's quite a few. You've made 2 seasons of a cooking show.
Yes.
For TELUS STORYHIVE.
Yeah. Which
I got to be a part of, which was super fun. And you have a 3rd season coming.
Coming up.
Check it out. TELUS STORYHIVE. The missing ingredient. You've also had a greeting card company, which you had cards sold across Canada and into America.
Yes.
Which is super cool. And that company was Wilder and is kind of in hiatus right now.
It's thinking about making a comeback.
Yes. So today I mostly want to talk about the transition from, living on the West Coast to living in the mountains, and then where that creativity kind of exists for you now, if it's inspired by your growing up, if it's inspired by the mountains, if it's a blending, or if it comes from somewhere else. So maybe we'll start with, you're also a prolific writer, write constantly. You've done 100 episodes of a podcast. So out of all the people I know, you're definitely one of the most prolific, creative people. Maybe the success hasn't always equaled the energy and, what you put in. But as far as sheer output, you're definitely someone who I look at as being able to set out to do something and hit that goal, even if it seems unlikely or unreasonable, especially if you're not getting the traction, that you want after 50 episodes of a podcast, to still stick with it and do 50 more. So maybe we'll start there with the podcast. You've done 100 episodes, and it's because you also work as a health coach, functional medicine health coach. And so the podcast kind of plays into that side of your life, and then also the creative side where you write out these very cool scripted episodes. So how did you start that, for one?
I think I wanted a platform where I could share thoughts that felt more fleshed out. Sometimes content creation is so short. It's so, under 90 seconds or whatever. And I wanted a place where I could talk about things that mattered, and it felt like a really good challenge. And it was a great opportunity for exploring my own thoughts, and then, learning how to use a whole new, set of skills and tools and all the things. I think you had asked about what it was, or like what contributes to the creativity or my process of creativity. And I feel like living in a small place or being in a small town, so much of it is based outside. We spend so much of our time outside, and that is definitely where I have all of my like aha moments. And I think that growing up in the Gulf Islands, which are really rural and remote, and there's just, I grew up without electricity or roads or phones or anything. And so a lot of life was just about like making things work imperfectly. And I think that that really contributes to my kind of style of like, I'm gonna do 100 episodes and they're not gonna be perfect, and I'm just gonna go for it.
That's cool. Actually, I've never thought about that, and I know you very well. But that scrappy can-do attitude of just doing it without all the right materials or technology and just making it work no matter what. Definitely, I can see your upbringing, how that would play into it. I've seen the photos. And yeah, I mean, you guys grew up very rural, very remote.
Yes.
We're remote. That's another boat access. No vehicles. You had to take a boat to school in the morning.
Yeah.
And yeah, you guys, it was very, what's the word, homesteady, where you had to provide, grew a big garden. Oftentimes you guys were stormed in and couldn't leave your home for, a week. Do you feel like that's contributed to, I guess there's probably like a positive and a negative kind of side to that, from the positive, you kind of learn everything you can do with very little, but on the other side, you're kind of, have this, what's the right word? I don't want to be offensive.
You are in a safe place.
But, you kind of had to go without a lot. You didn't have a typical upbringing. So you didn't have, you didn't play on sports teams, and you didn't have easy access to friendships or a neighborhood to run around with. So you probably spent a lot of your time in your own world, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And in books and.
Yeah, I think that definitely that boredom and that isolation, I mean, all you had was your imagination, and it's long days out there with just your mind. And we were all super creative, my mom, my brother. I think that it really contributed to the creative aspect, because anything that you could just do on your own or make or whatever, you would just go for it and flail and figure it out and be, patching things together. I think one of the challenges I think that came from that isolation is that there was not a lot of examples of things succeeding or working out, or also like being possible, where sometimes I think if you're in a bigger place, it's maybe easier to network and you can see people succeeding at things. But if you have no TV or electricity, you're just like up in your mind.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the books you have on the shelf.
Yes.
So people that have thought about starting a podcast, but they feel overwhelmed, you are somewhat technical. You're able to kind of figure things out, but you're not someone who's done that as a career. But you managed to record 100 episodes of a podcast on your own. So for people that have thought about doing it, do you have any advice, or like, there's the typical just get started, but I think that's too kind of throwaway of a comment. It's like, yeah, obviously I should just get started, but
yeah,
maybe like actionable steps someone could take.
That's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of us struggle with perfection, the concept of perfection, and that keeps us from starting. And so that's why that like exists, of like, you just got to start. I think that keeping it as simple as possible for me, that because I do love to write, that meant if I could write it out and script it, then I felt like I could deliver something that I felt was clear. And that was what was important to me. The audio wasn't always perfect, and I had things, but sometimes they wouldn't work. So I did record using like my headphones a couple times, because for me, what made me feel confident in it was that preparation. So I think probably if I was going to give advice on that, it would be figuring out what you could do that would make you feel prepared, would make you feel to some degree confident in your delivery of whatever it was. And then just going for it. I know it's so classic, but
it is true.
The first ones are just going to be bad. And I think that that's it. Like, just accepting. You know, I listened to the first episodes. I'm like, oh gosh.
I have such like the like incredible self-belief. So everything I do, I feel like it's going to be the best. Anything I do, as soon as I finish, I'm like, that's going to be really good. And then I love going back to those things later and being like, wow, okay, I can see there's some like kernels of, you know, possibility there.
Oh my gosh, you and I are so the opposite in that.
But yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth in the just get started, and, you know, things aren't going to be perfect. And, you know, we've talked about it recently, but I'm actually trying to seek out things where I know I won't be good at in the beginning, because something really appealing about trying something a bunch, knowing that your results aren't going to be great.
Yeah. Like, just giving yourself permission to be bad at it, and being like, you know, nobody starts out walking like fantastically. Why would we expect as of course, obviously. But as adults, we get so caught in these ideas that everything we do has to be so perfect or has to look a certain way for us to be proud of it. But it's that act of just starting it and doing it that I think is the most fun. And of course, it's vulnerable and feels ugly and weird. It's the same with the cooking show, but it's fun. And that, I think, is a good feeling that as adults we should explore more. You know, that sense of like, Oogie isn't bad. It's just funny.
Yeah. I think there's, you know, and it's a sweet place to get to, but there's a lot of ego, I think, you know, at least for myself, that especially in the creative field where I feel like I've done things I'm proud of and that have like other people thought were good. And so now when I do something, I have this internal like, oh, it's got to be at least that good or else people will think I'm slipping. And I don't want that, because that's my reputation and I am my reputation. But it's, you know, the idea of seeking out things you want to do, you're curious about, you want to try, that just finishing it, you know, is like the success.
Yeah, I think that something that I really believe in is this, that creativity or doing these weird projects or whatever it is adults playing. But we forget that component to creativity, and it becomes work and it becomes ego and it becomes all these things, which I understand 100%. You want the thing to be nice and good. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, it is just this playful opportunity, which and I might be off track here, but from a health perspective, that's such a huge component for our happiness and our well-being. And so watching so many people go through this process of reconnecting to their creativity and to that playful part of themselves as adults has just reiterated to me over and over again how important it is to just be willing to look like a fool and sound like a goof and get it wrong, because ultimately it's just funny and silly and makes you feel alive and makes you feel something. And later on, I mean, it's great. Even if the thing you make is not what you hoped for, you got to experience all of that kind of fun of preparing, and the stress and the weirdness and the uncertainty and the challenging yourself and the sitting in the discomfort of creating and then launching something is such a weird and awkward experience that makes you grow so much as a human, and really does come back to that sense of playfulness. I think, you know, when you look at kids, they're just constantly, hopefully, having the opportunity to be playful and silly and creative and weird, and there's an age of which that stops, and I think that we forget that it can just be saying weird things on the camera and 1,000 times.
Yeah. I think, you know, you touched on a couple of things I think, or at least for me personally, hit is the idea of play for sure. And I think, you know, once my creativity became my career, I think there was a time when I felt like I needed to take it seriously, because now this is a career. This is what I do. And I have clients and they expect a professional to show up and be here every day. And but then there's also, I think, this loss that comes with choosing it as a career versus if it's a passion that you just follow and you don't necessarily have to make money from it, or your relationship to it is different, I guess. But yeah, trying to find that playfulness again and seeking out collaborators and projects and mediums that are still feel playful. I think too, like what I did when I started, you know, when I was 20 is just different to what I do now that I'm in my 40s. And I still kind of hang on to like what I thought I needed to be in my 20s and versus like what I truly find fun right now. And so just a good reminder, you know, for myself to lean into the play and find the play. And when I work with clients, I feel like that's what they like the most about me, is that I'm having fun, that I really love doing what I do, and hopefully it comes through. But somewhere back there is still like the, you know, you need to take yourself seriously for other people to take you seriously.
You're grown up now.
But in your health coaching job, you do talk a lot about people roughly my age that have lost, they don't work as a creative as their job. But like you said, most people often as kids are creative and then at some point stop doing the things they love doing, which might have been drawing or dancing or singing or cooking or whatever it was. So what's your advice to those people that are, you know, because I think even in a creative field, like I make a living as a creative, but am I truly pursuing my creative side, or am I just a tool that can do the work that needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but so what I've observed is that this is the first thing to go when we become responsible adults. You know, there's just no time and there's no energy. And so we stop doing these random hobbies and creative expressions. And I think that there's also, it's important to understand that creativity can come in so many different ways, and it's such a unique thing. So we often just think of like the very mainstream concept of what creativity is, like painting and writing, and but you know, cooking or baking or working in the garden, all of these are beautiful expressions of creativity, and they connect us back to the part of us that is playful and sweet and youthful. And that is the thing that usually gets pushed aside, or that gets pushed into a part of our brain that's like, it's another to do. And so I think it's important as adults for us to kind of explore within ourselves what we maybe used to love doing, and seeing if that's still relevant, or even just those little moments that you have in your regular life where you maybe lose track of time, or you find a little bit of a flow state, or you feel peaceful, or you notice after you do it, you have a little bit more energy, and allow that thing to be important to yourself in the way that it is actually the thing that is connecting you to your youthful energy. So many people that I talk to or work with, they come because they just feel like blah, and they don't have like that zest. And inevitably we realize that life is just built around all the to-dos, and they're missing all the little moments that could be really simple, playful doodling, or, there's a lot of weird examples I could give, but
I love doodling.
Yes, you do.
It is like one of the most pure, what I just do as soon as I have, and I can just get lost in a doodle forever. But and people now make a living doodling.
Yeah.
I should have been on that boat. Yeah. But back to the cooking show. So you've done 25 episodes and you're about to do, a bunch more. Again, for people that have thought about pursuing something in that, because as a food creator, like I said, you're not a chef, but it's something you're passionate about. You've spent a lot of your time around food and pursuing different kind of ideas around cooking. And now you cook with like a very healthy, gut healthy menu, an ingredient list. So for people that have, maybe they have something in their life they would like to start a YouTube channel for, or So would you have any advice or things you've learned that you could say, again, other than the just get started?
Just start.
Which I totally get and is valid.
Yeah.
And is like great advice. But I think there's probably more tactical, lessons learned.
Yeah. I mean, that one is an interesting thing, because I definitely feel like I have an amazing support team. I think that if it can feel like fun and you're not taking yourself too seriously, that is some good magic. We talked about doing that cooking show for a long time before we started. And once we're into it, I realized, oh, you know what? This is just what I've always done. It's what I'm always doing. I don't have to think about it very much, which was always the advice that was offered. And I try and really keep my head space around it as this is just funny. I don't want to take myself seriously or overthink it and try and make myself somebody that I'm not. And definitely, there's a progress that happens coming into the third season. I feel way more relaxed about it. But I think really just trying to hold on to some shred of fun aspect to it. So, the cooking thing came about. That's something that has been in alignment with who I am since I was a really young child, homesteading and growing all our own food and cooking all of our own food. And so it felt like such a natural arena. And I think that if you have something like that in your life and you want to share it, then that's such a beautiful gift. It's something that you're just sharing, and it can just be a part of who you are, which I know when the camera turns on, it feels like not. But I guess it's like to just push past that. And this is something that maybe I do love. This is maybe something that is unique to me, where I will just set a challenge to be like, I'm going to do 100 episodes, or I'm going to do 5 seasons, or whatever it is, in a way that then I've committed it to myself, and I don't want to give up on myself, because then that's not great for your confidence.
Totally. And I think, as you were saying that, I was thinking about it too. I think there's like this committing to yourself or committing to somebody, or like setting some form of accountability, so that you just feel this, okay, now's the time that I start. Because we did talk about it for a long time. I wanted to do a podcast for a long time. And obviously TELUS has helped with both of those things. And I think beyond some funding, which is great, the accountability and just like the start and finish date make a big difference, because it just lights the fire. It gives you a structure. And I think that for a lot of creative things that you want to take beyond a doodle is that you need some form of box, some, guardrails to kind of...
You do way better when you have deadlines.
Yeah. And I think that's like from being client driven, is that my world works well when I have those guardrails, when it's like project starts here, it's got to finish by this date, and you just...
I think definitely, but I also think that if we don't have a deadline or we don't set ourselves these goals, with the podcast, it was like one every week. And with the cooking show, it was like, TELUS needs it by a certain date, so you got to do it. Without those things, it becomes too easy to overthink and too easy to get caught in that perfectionist kind of mindset. And that is no place to produce things from. It really will just like suck all the joy and the like magic out of something if you're overproducing it and overthinking it and trying to make it. I'm not a perfectionist.
Well, and I think that's what makes what you do really good. And it's something that, like, on the other side where I've lived is, trying to make things perfect. And that's really hard to do, like on the client side, just like whether the budget or the time or skill set just isn't enough to ever kind of like truly get it to where you envision it. And on this side, this like playful, it doesn't need to be perfect, is like really fun, but my brain is still caught here. And to get over to that place where it's, there's a phrase which I really like, which is, what you really want to do is just have you pushed out to the world. Like, that's what people want. They don't want the version of you that is, media trained and trying to say the right thing and what you think other people want to hear. Is just truly, what do you think? Who are you? What are the jokes you laugh at? What do you think is funny? What is your, brain interpret the world as?
I think that sharing, it's an interesting idea. So, the idea of sharing ourselves with the world is terrifying, because we do live in a time where criticism comes in hot and heavy. And there has to be, I think, a willingness to expose yourself to that. And that is scary. And I think probably holds a lot of people back from sharing the parts of themselves that are really, that really is the expression that they want to share, that unique thing about them. And, we talk about this a lot, but I think that it's kind of equal parts like desensitizing yourself to the criticism in some capacity, and I've had a lot of years of that runway, which allowed me to show up for the StoryHive cooking show with like kind of the ability to be like, well, people are not going to like this and that's okay. And I think that the journey, and maybe it's not like this for everybody, but I think that if there is something that people want to share that they're not sharing, that it is kind of a journey of just starting somewhere that feels like safe for them where they're at. Having the teleprompter would have been so nice. But starting with that and then just building into it instead of letting it all go at once, and then if it doesn't land quite right, not being able to or prepared to take that blow.
And so going into the third season of the cooking show, anything that you're changing, that you want to do differently? Yeah,
I have mostly thought about being more of my silly self. That's something that we started, that you actually really encouraged me to bring into the last season. And I just realized that it's less effortful when I am more of a dork because I am kind of a silly human, and trying to be a version of myself that appeared, perfectly spoken and scripted and saying all the right things and hitting all the cues was, it took a lot of energy. It took a lot of effort. And I think that's what I was trying to allude to earlier, of like trying to access that part of you that is you and bringing that to the project, which only can come with time. Obviously, in the beginning, we're like robots for the most part, maybe. But for this season, yeah, for me, it's about, I just want to be more silly. I love the idea of like showing the mistakes and that realness. It's a kitchen. Like constantly things are going wrong. And that's fine.
It does take time though. I think that, when you're doing something especially for the first time, that there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of moving parts, and you want to be, especially if you're not super confident about like that you're the best chef.
Oh man.
So it's like,
I'm not. Not good.
She's really good. And it's delicious, and I'm lucky I get to eat a lot of it. But I think it takes time to kind of get out of your own way in those situations where you've kind of like figured enough of it out and got into a rhythm that you can kind of then just relax into, being silly, being more of who you are naturally. And then also, be willing to be vulnerable in that, because you know that.
And I think that that's the part of the, like, you just got to start that's really maybe not necessarily talked about is you really do just have to start, because it's the only way. But I think there's a component to it, which is, and trust yourself in knowing that it's going to get better. We start somewhere, and it's like part of us believes that we should just be nailing it perfectly out of the gates, and that stops most of us from starting anything. But if we had the confidence in ourselves or the trust in ourselves that, I'm going to start here and it's going to be like not good, but I know that if I just keep doing it, just like how I kept practicing walking and now I'm like pretty good. I did fall the other day. That's neither here nor there, but that's part of the journey. I think that is maybe missing from that, like you just got to start concept. Is like, you just got to start and trust yourself that it's going to get better and that you are going to get better and evolve and become a version that presents better than you did in the beginning.
The fun aspect is an important part too, because I think that's the other part that can happen is you can just start and then you can take it seriously because you want to do a good job or you want to come across a certain way, and then you forget to have fun, and then you just stop because this thing that you're doing extra anyways, that's taking more of your time, is no longer fun, and then you don't want to pursue it anymore. And so how do you, go into it with, it's going to be a challenge to do to some degree depending on what you're doing, but that it's okay, and you can fail and you can have fun and you can flail and you can make a fool of yourself, and also that where you start might not be where you finish, and be open to that kind of, tangled path that unfolds in front of you, because I think that's truly the fun, is that you start one place and you end up somewhere completely different because all of a sudden you start pulling these threads. It's like writing too. I think that there's this incredible thing, and I think, writing is this, for a lot of people, probably untapped like mechanism to like get to places they never knew they could, because once you start writing, it's amazing where your fingers and your mind will take you that you just didn't even know that you could. And often in a short amount of time you've created something. When you read it back, you're like, holy smokes, I wasn't thinking about that. It wasn't like exist perfectly. It's all of a sudden things start unfolding. And I think creativity, no matter what the medium, like that can just kind of unfold in front of you, and it's like, wow, I never really knew this is where it would end up. And it can be really surprising and beautiful and fun. And
you got to start with that permission to even to get into it, though. And I think that I think about, okay, so if we followed my whole pathway, I started with writing, for a blog. And then that transferred into being on social media, video, which ended up being like lots of the reels or whatever. And that transferred into having a podcast. And that podcast transferred into doing a YouTube channel, but it's like without following that curiosity or following that that flow of the creative process, then definitely the idea of doing a YouTube channel in the beginning was like, nope. Like, I do not go on screen. I can't hardly speak. Like, not happening. So yeah, I think that just finding that place to start and giving yourself that permission to get into whatever it is, like writing is one of my favorite things, and I think everyone should do it, but I can't convince everybody of that, unfortunately.
To be vulnerable in front of someone, I've always been amazed at your ability to be vulnerable in front of me, you know, especially when there's a camera pointed at you and we got microphones and other cameras. Just to be yourself isn't super easy. And then when I edit it, it's always so hard to say, edit it. Or who edited it?
Yes, too many.
Who edited it?
You rapping?
But it's super cool to see like the progression of like you, and even from like the first one, I was blown away by how much of you comes across through it, that I do feel like when I'm doing the editing that I'm hanging out with you. It feels very authentic, and I know that's a word that's thrown around a lot, but it's true, and it's cool, and I don't think it's super easy for everyone to do that when there's a camera.
I'm kind of an expert.
So I feel like that's enough probably for this episode.
Yeah.
I think we'll get more into your backstory in the future, because I think that'd be super cool. And then once we have done the next season of the cooking show, I think it'll be cool to kind of come back and see where our own YouTube has gotten to, if it has attracted an audience, what that audience looks like, what we've learned from that process. Because I think, you know, for me, I watch a lot of like, you know, how to YouTube. And there's so much you can learn from watching, and then there's a certain amount that you just are going to learn from doing. And it's been super cool to be doing the doing now.
Yeah.
And putting it out there, and like there's all this stuff I've accumulated as far as how to that, you know, I'm like, oh, you know, try this and try that, and then to see what works, what doesn't, why. I don't feel like we have enough videos yet to like truly have the data.
Data will come later.
But it was great to have you on.
It's been great to be here.
And yeah, we'll definitely do more. And is there anything you want to leave our audience with today, just about what you're doing, or any thoughts, or any kind of like, I don't want to say advice, but just like things that you've experienced?
I guess like something that I've already said it, but I just think it's so important for us to remember, which is that as adults, we get to be creative for no purpose, for no reason other than just our own health and well-being. And it is so linked to our mental and emotional health, and how much that translates to our physical health. And so while it is usually the first thing to go, and maybe it's, you know, mostly creative professionals that will be watching or listening, but just to have some part that's just for you and just for your own soul is what generates happiness and that vibrant energy that often starts to dwindle in our 40s. So it's important that we hang on to it, or rekindle it, or work to make it happen, because it doesn't just combust out of nowhere. It's something that takes effort and consistency.
I want to thank Gwen for putting up with me today. She's so easy to talk to and has such a wonderful view of creativity. It's definitely inspired me to let my guard down more and lean into the fun and playful parts of my creative practice. And I hope she's filled you with inspiration to start that thing you've been talking about. Remember, just make it imperfect. Easier said than done, I know. Thanks for hanging with me. Until next time, remember, we're all at least remotely creative. See you later.